Every November, millions gather around tables laden with turkey and gratitude. But beneath the cranberry sauce and wishful thinking lies a story so brutal, so complex, that America chose to forget it entirely. In 1621, 53 English survivors sat with 90 Wampanoag warriors. What happened next wasn't a celebration of friendship. It was the beginning of a 3-century genocide that would consume an entire continent. This is not the story they taught you in school. This is the story of how a meal became a myth, and how a myth became the foundation of American denial. Massasoit, Sachem of the Wampanoag, faced an impossible choice. Half his people lay dead from European diseases. The strangers offered alliance, but alliance with ghosts who spoke of a jealous, vengeful God. For 3 days they shared deer, fowl, and corn. But Massasoit saw what the English could not. This was not celebration. It was negotiation. Every bite was a treaty written in silence and suspicion. William Bradford watched his people eating food grown in graveyards. Every kernel of corn sprouted from soil enriched by Patuxet bones, a village wiped clean by plague just 4 years before their arrival. The English gave thanks to Providence for clearing the land. They called it divine intervention. The Wampanoag called it Kinamogahamwogan, the day the earth broke open and swallowed the voices of the dead. Squanto, the sole survivor of Patuxet, spoke perfect English. He had been kidnapped, sold into slavery in Spain, escaped to England, and walked back to find his entire world erased. He became their translator and their judge. You want to know what it means to be American? It means sitting at a table where half the chairs belong to the dead, and pretending the empty seats were always meant for you. Within 50 years, King Philip's War would paint New England red. Massasoit's son would watch his people's heads mounted on pikes in Plymouth. The feast of 1621 became the funeral of 1675. Mary Rowlandson, captured during the war, wrote of eating horse liver and acorns. She called it God's trial. Her captors called it Tuesday. Survival has different names in different languages. The English learned to scalp from French bounty hunters. 20 pounds for a warrior's hair, 10 for a woman's, 5 for a child's. Commerce has always been more American than compassion. In 1637, Captain John Mason burned 400 Pequot alive in their fort. The English gave thanks for this victory. They called it the first official Thanksgiving. Genocide tastes different than turkey. Cotton Mather, Puritan minister, wrote that God had swept away the heathen like dust. He failed to mention that dust was made of children's bones and mothers' tears. History is written by the living. For 2 centuries, Thanksgiving remained regional and sporadic. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln made it national. He needed Americans to remember what they were grateful for while they killed each other. The Pilgrims never called themselves pilgrims. They were saints and strangers. The name came from a poem written 2 centuries later. America has always been better at inventing its past than facing it. Norman Rockwell painted Freedom from Want in 1943. A grandmother serves turkey to her perfect family. Outside, the world burned. Inside, America dreamed of a past that never existed. The Wampanoag still live in Massachusetts. Every November, they hold a day of mourning. They gather at Plymouth Rock, not to celebrate, but to remember what was lost when the feast ended. In 1970, a Wampanoag man named Frank James was invited to speak at Plymouth's Thanksgiving celebration. When officials read his speech, they banned him. Truth was not on the menu that day. James spoke anyway outside the celebration. He said, "We cannot celebrate your Thanksgiving because it is a reminder of the genocide of our people." The crowd inside could not hear him. The Mayflower Compact promised to spread Christianity to the natives. It said nothing about sharing land, respecting culture, or honoring treaties. America's first document was also its first lie. Every fourth Thursday in November, America sits down to a meal built on buried bones. We carve turkey and serve stuffing, but we refuse to digest the truth that made this feast possible. The real first Thanksgiving was not gratitude. It was grief. Not celebration, but survival. Not unity, but the moment when two worlds collided and only one learned how to remember selectively. Perhaps the most American thing about Thanksgiving is not what we remember, but what we choose to forget. And perhaps the most human thing is that we keep gathering anyway, around tables laden with ghosts. In 1676, Metacom's head rotted on a spike for 25 years. Children threw stones at the skull of King Philip. This is how America taught its young the price of resistance. Benjamin Church, the man who killed Metacom, wrote the first American war memoir. He called it Entertaining Passages. Entertainment and extermination. Sometimes the line between them disappears in the telling. The Abenaki survived by becoming ghosts. They hunted at night, spoke in whispers, buried their dead in unmarked graves. To exist, they learned to not exist. Invisibility became a form of prayer. The disappeared became Californians performing in Disney's Thanksgiving parade. They became Oklahomans selling dream catchers at gas stations. They became survivors disguised as tourists in the museums of their own stolen land. Sarah Josepha Hale wrote letters to 5 presidents, begging for a national Thanksgiving. She dreamed of manufactured unity, one shared meal to bind a fracturing nation. But genocide requires deeper forgetting than gratitude allows. The turkey, pardoned by each president, lives on a farm in Virginia. It dies of natural causes within months, its body too heavy for its engineered heart. Even our symbols of mercy are bred for death. In 1889, Jane Addams served Thanksgiving dinner to Chicago's poorest immigrants. She called it democracy in action. The Italians, Poles, and Irish ate turkey while learning to forget their own massacres. The Oneida sided with America during the Revolution. Their reward? Forced removal to Wisconsin. Loyalty, they discovered, was a currency that depreciated faster than continental dollars. Betrayal, compounded annually. Innocence armed with crayons proves more dangerous than malice armed with muskets. Children trace their hands to make paper turkeys, drawing pilgrims with buckled hats that never existed, Indians with feathers who lived in longhouses, not teepees. Ira Hayes, Pima Indian, raised the flag at Iwo Jima. He returned home to find his people's water stolen by white farmers. He drowned in alcohol and Arizona heat. Heroes die twice in America. The Mashpee Wampanoag got federal recognition in 2007, 386 years after the first Thanksgiving. The government that once tried to erase them now officially acknowledge their existence. Paperwork is resurrection. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show toured Europe in 1887. Sitting Bull performed his own defeat nightly for cheering crowds. The conquered teaching their conquerors how to remember conquest. Theater is tune. In boarding schools, Native children were beaten for speaking their languages. They were forced to give thanks in English for the civilization that was killing them. Gratitude became a form of torture. The Pilgrims' first winter killed half of them. They survived by robbing Wampanoag graves for corn. The first Thanksgiving was built on stolen food from the dead, grave robbing as divine providence. Leonard Peltier has been imprisoned for 48 years for defending his people. The FBI admits its evidence was fabricated. Yet, he remains caged while the nation celebrates justice with cranberry sauce and wishbones. The Pequot own the world's largest casino. They serve Thanksgiving dinner to gamblers who bet on football games named after tribes they helped destroy. Irony pays better than justice. Tisquantum, Squanto, was kidnapped on Thanksgiving's future anniversary, November 1614. 400 years later, Americans celebrate the holiday on the date of his enslavement. Time is a circle that forgets its own wounds. the Dakota 38 were hanged 2 days after Christmas, 1862, the largest mass execution in American history. Their crime? Defending their children from starvation. Santa and the gallows shared the same winter sky. Plymouth Rock is a myth. The Pilgrims never mentioned it. The rock was invented in 1741 by a 94-year-old man with failing memory. America's founding moment is built on dementia every Thanksgiving. The Wampanoag gather at sunrise. They throw flowers into the ocean for their ancestors. The Atlantic carries their petals back to England, a reverse migration of grief. The Mayflower II is a replica built in 1957. The original rotted away centuries ago. Americans visit a fake ship to remember a fake story about a fake friendship. Tourism as archaeology of lies. Miles Standish was 5 feet tall and known for his temper. He once severed a Massachusetts chief's head and displayed it as a warning. Short men with sharp swords write history in blood. The Wampanoag language has no word for Thanksgiving. They had Keepanuman, to be grateful. But gratitude, they knew, was not a feast. It was a way of breathing, a rhythm older than hunger. The Pilgrims despised lobster, poor man's food, fit only for servants and prisoners. 3 centuries later, their descendants pay $50 for what their heroes fed to criminals. Value depends on forgetting context. Pokanoket children learn to count using wampum beads. White beads for ones, purple for fives. When Europeans arrived, they turned this mathematics into money. Numbers became chains. Knowledge became currency. After the Great War's slaughter, Jean-Léon Jerome Ferris painted harmonious pilgrims and Indians sharing food. America needed comforting myths to mask fresh graves. Art became anesthesia for a traumatized nation. Massasoit's real name was Usamaquin. Massasoit meant Great Sachem, a title, not a name. For 4 centuries, Americans couldn't be bothered to learn what to call the man who saved them. The Narragansett refused to join King Philip's War. They chose neutrality and were massacred anyway. In the Great Swamp Fight, English soldiers burned women and children alive. Neutrality was not an option. Canonicus, the Narragansett Sachem, lived to be over 90. He watched his world die inch by inch, treaty by treaty. Old men see the future because they remember when the present was impossible. The Thanksgiving wishbone tradition came from the Etruscans. 2 people pull until it breaks. The winner gets their wish. America has been breaking bones for wishes since before it knew its own name. Native American suicide rates are double the national average. The highest rates are among young people who've never known a world without casinos, diabetes, and apologies. Survival can be its own form of dying. You want to honor the first Thanksgiving? Stop calling it that. Call it what it was. A negotiation between the desperate and the doomed. A meal shared by people who didn't know they were both dying. The Cranberry Bog, where Ocean Spray films its commercials, sits on former Wampanoag land. Native children once gathered the same berries their ancestors now watch being harvested by machines for television. William Apes, half-Pequot preacher, gave the first Native American autobiography in 1829. He wrote, "The whites have taken our country, and we have taken their God." Who has the better bargain? The turkey trot dance was banned in many cities for being too sexual. Americans could celebrate genocide, but not hip gyrations. Moral boundaries shift like sand dunes in the desert of conscience. Every November, school children trace their hands to make paper turkeys. 5 fingers become feathers. But they never learn that real turkeys can't fly, like the myths we build from their bones. The Mayflower Compact was signed in Provincetown Harbor, not Plymouth. Even the birthplace of American democracy is a lie. We built a nation on quicksand and called it bedrock. In 2020, during the pandemic, Americans ate Thanksgiving dinner alone. For the first time in 4 centuries, the holiday looked like what it always was: isolation, survival, and pretending everything was normal. The Wampanoag word for turkey is Nahom. It means the one who makes noise. They named the bird for its honesty. Americans named the holiday for its lie. Truth and deception, separated by language. What if we told the truth? What if we said, we gather to remember those who died so we could live here? We feast on their silence. We are grateful for their absence. The first Thanksgiving lasted 3 days. It has now lasted 400 years. Some meals never end. Some guests never leave. Some debts compound interest in the currency of conscience. Every Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag light fires on the beach. The smoke rises like prayers, or accusations, or both. The wind carries it across the water, toward the horizon where other worlds wait. The turkey on your table weighs 40 pounds. Wild turkeys weigh 12. We have engineered gratitude the same way we engineered the bird. Too heavy to fly, too bloated to survive, too artificial to be real. Perhaps the most honest thing about Thanksgiving is that it happens in November, the month when everything dies, when the earth prepares for winter, when memory freezes and truth goes underground. The Pilgrims called America the New World. But worlds are not new. They are only new to those who did not know they existed. Discovery is the arrogance of the lost. When November arrives and tables groan with abundance, silence inhabits the spaces between blessing and blade. In that pause before carving, the wind carries echoes, drums, tears, the whispered names of the forever missing. The Wampanoag are still here, still speaking their language, still lighting fires on the beach, still remembering what we choose to forget. Survival is the longest form of resistance. Memory is the sharpest weapon. This is the untold story of Thanksgiving. Not the feast, but the famine. Not the friendship, but the forgetting. Not the gratitude, but the grief. The story America tells itself to sleep at night.